So I know the moment I even try to start recording this video, it's going to be difficult, and for the sake of time and effort, I definitely just wanted to have this video alone talking about this chapter specifically, and of course my overall thoughts on the series as a whole. But when it comes to something like a super specific in-depth discussion revolving around the entirety of this series as a whole and the message Hajime Isayama has delivered, that video will definitely come out within due time. But just from this chapter alone, the amount of emotions, reflection, and heartfelt moments all gathered in from each and every chapter leading up to this main event within the final chapter of Attack on Titan was something that I personally will never forget for as long as I'm alive. The series of Attack on Titan has been an anime and a manga that's never left my side in terms of whether it's been enjoyment, excitement, and commitment. And I think it just goes to show that for each and every true reader of this series of Attack on Titan, that just because this series has now left us and has now reached true greatness, that of course we're going to be sad, and of course the feeling of fulfillment has now been achieved, but truly this series will never leave us. And for myself personally, it's how I truly feel about this series. And even now, after a whole day of reflection on this chapter, it's not really clicking to me that this series is really over. And it's crazy to think that at first an anime back in 2013 could make someone like myself into the person that I am today. Without Attack on Titan, there would be no Agi. Without anime and manga, there would be no Agi. And it's so hard to see something that really picks you up at the hardest moments in your life now leave you to push it goodbye into something that will be remembered as one of the greatest pieces of fiction in the entire world. And you know, for the people who are truly upset with the conclusion to this manga, I can completely understand. I felt as though there are points in the series, specifically chapters 121 onward, where the interpretation of the reader split off, and that's okay. And either way, the way Isayama ended his story could have fallen into either direction, hence why the readers of the series were such at a hard point of really trying to interpret the ending of this story. And like I said, I myself personally have not been left with this series long enough to fully flesh out my opinions on this series as a whole in a full-fledged and in-depth discussion about the series of Attack on Titan overall. But as of right now, my thoughts and where my heart is telling me to go is straight to the source of this beautiful series. So thank you, Isayama, and let's hop into the end of Attack on Titan. So usually when all good things come to an end, it's important to reflect on what truly got us to the place where we are today, and that's simply what happened when jumping into this final chapter of Attack on Titan. And it was to be expected, especially as things were coming to a close, and it was clear that this discussion between both Eren and Armin was something that was a must to end a story like this. A story where the start is the finish in a sense. And it allowed us to take in from these moments of reflection and embodiment of each and every single character in this series, more importantly directly towards the beginning of this chapter, Eren and Armin. And so we initially get to see a past tense in their conversation about how all the events leading up till now were done for the future of his friends and people. Hence why the population wasn't why it was annihilated by 100% but 80% of humanity. Eren knew what he had to do even if the majority of it was inhumanely right. He knew pushing his friends away and making them portrayed as the heroes towards the second half of the series and betraying him as a Titan of a villain was the only way to push him to eradicating the Titans and putting an end to the so-called Titan world. As we move on, a moment of exploring the world beyond the sea and beyond the expectations of humanity is fulfilled in Armin's dream. Things like exploring what is to be a volcano and lava in a sense. In this moment, we can see how Eren is clearly just watching Armin's reaction, knowing that truly this will never be the reality of what is to happen next. We later find out the true intentions and feelings of Ymir and how she was deeply in love with Karl Fritz. This then leads to, quite frankly, something as of right now, it's a bit hard for me to explain, but in terms of my own interpretation, I think the reference at the start of the story to you 2000 years from now was initially changed with something that had to revolve around the original ending that was changed due to popularity around 8 years ago. But now since the ending has been changed, I think that what truly this phrase means is not a message for Eren, but a message for Mikasa. But this, it can mean a variety of things, although I think the most obvious one would be that this meaning / message sent across through time was for Mikasa to revolve around this meaning of making Mikasa's character to what she became to be within these last few chapters. When all along, I really thought this message and meaning was for Eren, but really once again, it was for Mikasa. And we hear more on this later on when both Eren and Armin are still having their conversation about the story of Ymir. If you look at it though, they align perfectly with each other's characters, and maybe most of us were just blind by the fact that we thought this whole perception of Ymir's character had to be more relevant to Eren. But with the full story of Ymir and the agony as they both yearn for each other's freedom, and for 2000 years, Ymir sought someone who would release her from the agony of love. a parallel to Mikasa. And exactly how would you assume so? Someone appeared because Ymir wasn't capable of doing that before. Therefore, it either was metaphorically passed down or is a reincarnation that someone yearning for freedom and the agony of love was Mikasa Ackerman. And mind you, during this monologue of myself and the conversation between Eren and Armin, it seems to be pretty parallel in a sense where I feel like the audience is supposed to reflect as Armin and of course Eren as Eren. Armin is still confused and doesn't really understand what Eren is saying, and that's okay. Even though he was paying attention the entire time, in question Armin says, "Why Mikasa?" And well, if you were following along, someone like Ymir is the only one who knows that answer. As for Eren, he still didn't even know what Mikasa would end up doing. But one thing was for sure, and that was the result of Mikasa's choice and how all of it was to arrive at this result. So that is why Eren, the main character of the series, was persistent enough to move forward. In doing so, he continued to realize, and given how he understands how he murdered 3/4 of the population, led to his friends even killing each other on Paradis. In the end, he still couldn't accomplish completely what his goal was, and that was freedom. Because as most of you know, in a society wrapped up in something Isayama has built up so much and so intelligently enough, freedom will never be a true option, just like how it is in the real world. And along that, Armin comes to the reality that ever since the medal ceremony, Eren has switched his position and in doing so, strived him away from his friends and being alone ever since then. And throughout the years, Eren's mind and embodiment of himself has never felt more messed up on a level of the founder's powers and meaning. And the result of it is that there never will be a past nor a future. All that exists is that the conjoinment between the two, and that moving forward was the only option. So that on that day, on just how everything changed, it wasn't as if it was sent by the future nor the past. It was being held all in motion at the same time. That day, Bertolt, it wasn't his time to die. No. Not just yet, but it also wasn't because of him that his mother was killed, it was all because of me, Eren Yeager. And to be quite frank, that summary of the both of them during that time wasn't necessarily happy or sad, but the realization of how truly messed up the world is. As continues, Eren and Armin continue to go throughout the world in spite of everything. Armin asks, "What were you thinking about Mikasa?" And Eren, in spite of everything, doesn't really know or at least understands what truly is capable of her next. But what she did today was a figment of her character, and Eren, as stubborn as he is, even though knowing the possibility of her finding someone else could be possible, he doesn't want that in the slightest. And even at the brink of death, knowing that he will die, he still wants to be with Mikasa for as long as can be. And he knows that for him that's impossible. With this, Eren knows he can no longer be forgiven. And even now, Eren knows that he didn't know why, but it was something that he just had to do to become, in quotes, free. And then it leads to Eren saying that from now, Eren's memories of this place will be wiped until, of course, Eren has been killed. Armin in the end recognizes the truth of Eren's sacrifice and how it was all for their sake. And even now, Eren still doesn't know the fate of the future, but what he does know is that Armin and the others can make it to the other side of the walls, and that humanity will be saved by none other than the one who tells and narrates the story of Attack on Titan, Armin Arlert. And after the long discussion of the start of the beginning, it was time to move back to the conclusion of the Battle of Heaven and Earth. We now see that beforehand, Armin had lost his memories, but now with the assassination of Eren Yeager, now everything makes sense on why Eren said his last goodbyes and why he couldn't be saved. Because Eren knew that if Mikasa and Armin knew of his true intentions, this never would have been able to be accomplishable. That the result of his choice was for the sake of the rest of humanity and the end of an era. This led to the power of the Titans being extinguished from the face of this world, and each and every single one of the people relayed that final message that sent them to remember everything Eren had told them. And just as you think everyone gets their thoughts of realization, Levi is accompanied by those that devoted their hearts for the sake of humanity just one last time. And the same thing goes for Jean and Connie with the last moments of Sasha's smile. With everyone being rejoiced with their family and friends, it was time to take Eren to the place where it all began. But before that, the people of Marley are still unaware of the abolishment of the Titan powers and are still scared. And at this point in time in the chapters where I knew Isayama had to pull this card. What I mean by this is that just because the Titans have vanished, it doesn't just mean it's as simple as a snap of a couple fingers. And with a minor conversation being held with the people of Marley and the Eldians, Armin Arler, a man from the island of Paradis, the man acclaimed to have killed Eren Yeager, sets up a deal that leads to the future exactly 3 years from now. And that now we know that that day was known as the Battle of Heaven and Earth. So now with everything seemingly to have formulated across the globe, 3 years have passed and still the people of the world aren't yet healed by a lifetime of scars and wounds across the planet. But along that, both nations of Eldia had formed a so-called army controlled by the Jaegers and now focused focus on their efforts on building a military. And they know that with a fearful amount of retaliation from what is left alongside humanity on the other side of the sea, the island collectively yells out together and as one, if we win, we live. If we lose, we die. If you don't fight, we can't win. So all that's left is to fight and fight. And many know that this fight won't end, not until either Eldia or the world itself is gone, and that the fate of the world is left up to the people who saved it, a world without titans. And with the final moments of everyone that's still alive within the story, they rejoice as spokespeople to the people of the world, and even though they know conflict will never vanish, if they are to see everyone together, working together, they'll have to want to know about the story of Attack on Titan, because this story is about the people who tried to kill each other off for so very long and had to be apprehended on the island of Paradis to advocate for peace. And of course, everyone will want to know what exactly they saw. So as Armin says, let's tell them everything. With this, an end to an era and a burial is the last thing that needs to be taking place. And with the walls gone and Mikasa accepting the fate of what has occurred, she still wants to meet Eren once more. And after saying that, a bird from the vast depths comes down and just once more wraps the scarf around her neck with one final thank you. Goodbye. So I know this video for the most part was me indirectly talking about the chapter, and every so often I would give my input on the situation taking place, but I just felt that it needed to be done. With the chapter so beautiful and heartwarming to the story of the series, I feel like at least not for a while I'll feel this way about any other anime and or manga. And before I wrap up this video, I just wanted to thank you, Isayama Sensei, for creating this beautiful and wonderful series, and hope you are happy with any further path you choose to go down. Of course, I would love for you to write again, but if you choose not to, that's perfectly okay with me, as long as I know that you are the creator of this series. There's nothing that I could be upset about. So once again, thank you Isayama, and goodbye, Shingeki no Kyojin.